Gentle lady, this is K.C. Stevens.
That's me. I'll get out from under the glasses. My name is...
He told me his first name, I cannot say it.
Yeah, my first name is either Casimiro or Casimir or K.C. by my friends. So you folks will know it. And feel free, if you have any questions, and don't drag out the meeting, so he says. And there are a bunch of pictures that you could see over there. Those pictures were taken in Tarawa. If you knew the Battle of Tarawa, that was in the South Pacific. And there's one of the midget subs that nobody even knew that they existed. I was the person in Pearl Harbor that accounted for 7 of those subs. I made reports to the goof that I'm talking about. He was a junior grade lieutenant, and he didn't know what time of the day it was, but he was in charge. And when I reported, he says, "Subs? There are no subs in this harbor." "I know, I checked up." I said, "I don't care who you checked up with." I says, "There's subs in the harbor, we better watch out." No, they knew everything was better, you know. So I says, "Well, the hell with you," I told this officer. Got me ticked off because of that. So what happened was, this thing went on. First wave went on. Here comes a Jap pilot. It's just, we shot down the plane. I remember that. He come by and dropped his bomb. And then he was swimming in front of the ship. And even though he was an enemy, he was hurt. I knew he was hurt, and I wanted to go and get down below and help him. So he was tied. The ship that I was on was built in 1923. It was an old clunker with asbestos piping and everything else. And I got some of that too. Anyway, what happened was, during that particular time when he came out, there was a lull in the bombing. The first group of planes that came in was 260 planes. Second was 267. And they come in just like flies. Well, what happened was, whenever he was swimming along he crashed this plane because we hit it and it was damaged and he couldn't fly any longer. So he started swimming from the plane. He tried to make the beach, but the beach was too far, and I knew it was too far that he was swimming. So he came alongside our ship, which was an old clunker, and they had not welded plates. They had plates that were riveted with rivets, you know, the old-time system for building ships because of that era. Well, he came alongside the plate, and I'm there looking. He's swimming, and he gets on one of those 3/4-inch plates with his fingers, and he's hanging on. He's breathing hard. And I said, "Boy, I got to get down and help the guy." So here comes the first plane of the second wave. I had to leave. And I don't know what happened to him. But you know, after all the years, I was called to Pearl Harbor on a VIP program. They did all this glory thing, and you know, I'm not that kind of a person because I get really emotional. And if I get emotional now, don't get excited because that happens to me. I got a bad case of PTSD. I was shot up 3 times. I can go on and on about me, but I'm not talking about me. I'm talking to you people about what happened out there. Well, anyway, when the battle was over, I went to see if that individual was there, but he wasn't. He swam. He was hanging onto the plates on a ship were overlapped like this, and they were riveted, see, and there was enough room here, like 3/4 of an inch, you can hang on to it. And I knew he was hurt badly. because he crashed this plane. Well, it turned out that when I come back there after the lull, when a second wave came in, he was gone. And that, it bothered me. Even though he was an enemy, he was an individual and he was hurt. And that bothered me over the years. And it was in about 30 years later, they invited me down to a VIP thing at Pearl Harbor. They want to know different things. And now they're changing everything. The government is changing all the credits on planes and everything else that was knocked down by our own people at Pearl Harbor. And that, I mean by that, planes, anything, submarines, anything in the water, we fired on. And our ship was credited, we shot down 7 planes and we got 1 sub. They wouldn't credit us that. They made us take it off because we were not a capital ship, meaning we weren't a battleship, or I was at that time on a fleet where I was a battleship repair unit. We used to do all kinds of work to help them out, and we did fighting too. But it turned out that that these people, in those days, if you weren't the top-ranking officer, your name was mud. You could, no matter what your lower rank was. So everybody was fighting for glory. And it reminded me a lot of, what was this guy that was fighting the Indians there in Montana? Battle of a Little Bighorn?
Custer.
Him. I hated him more than anything that I can think of, believe it or not, because he was a glory grabber. He wasn't a fighter. He fought in the Civil War. And it turned out that after his fighting, his glory came from his wife. And he split up his army there at the battle. And I was there to see if there was mistakes made. And I'm no expert. That jerk, and I mean he was a complete jerk, and that's what I think of the person, he took and he split his army in half. Here's how he was going after glory. And you guys remember this because that's the worst thing you can do in your lifetime. I'm a human being, and I'm one of the people I'm slow and slow, but I'm mean. That's the way I am. I was brought up that way. The same thing happened with these people. So he went out there when he split his army. He sent 1 to the right, 2 to the left, and 1 to the top on the left side. Well, what happened was, here he's gonna get up there and he'll go bypass the lower armies and he'd go up to the top over there, and that was the smallest one, so most of them will get killed. And he'd get in there and say, "Oh, I killed off all the Indians," because there was nobody to fight. But what happened was, when they went out, and this is anything I tell you, it's in the books. You can read it in the books. There are books about Pearl Harbor. There are books about every battle that was fought there, if you want to read about it. Same thing with the Civil War. And he was in the Civil War first. He got a commanding general commission, but it wasn't a real general, not a real army. I mean, it was like an honor thing. And when the war ended, of course, they took it away from him, so he wound up to be a lieutenant colonel, is what he was. And they always kept saying General Custer, General Custer. General Custer was not a general. And if you're reading a book, the latest books, they'll indicate that this jerk, I call him, he took and he went out on battles. He didn't go for the country or for the battle. He went for himself, for his glory. And when he pushed his army up north and he was going to meet them there, guess what? They all came out, a whole bunch. There were 100 and some in that group. The total of the battle was 260 soldiers were lost there. So he went up there in big gold glory, charge! And here come 3,000 Indians against 260 soldiers, and they wiped them out. That's what the battle amounted to. The same thing happened. We had another jerk like that in the Second World War. He was that beautiful general that his wife was with him in Philippine Islands, and he commandeered PT boats, 9 of them, to get out of there and get the hell out. He was a lousy coward. And they glorified him. You know, I don't see those kind of people, and I say what they are, and I call them what they are. That guy was just a phony. And I told one of my sons when we went to Virginia. He was buried in Virginia. They wouldn't bury him in a national cemetery. I don't know what reason, but he was in Virginia. They buried him near a town hall. So my son was in the chopper squadron at that time. By the way, my family is a military family. Everybody in the family except 2 of them were in a service overseas in combat. Everyone. I have a son who is a full bird colonel who just got out of service. They called him back 6 times back to Afghanistan after he went. I have another one that's still in there now, and he's heading up a new program for the government, and all the states, the 53 states or whatever, they contact him. He travels all over teaching people. His bag is, he went to college, and I'll tell all of you guys, and I'm not a crummy or I'm not a dictator. You go to school, study. Don't give up. Study and study whatever you want. Don't get a puppy dog degree, you know. I mean, watching dogs or something. Get a degree that means something. Science. That's what this country needs. Science, mechanics, things of that sort. And don't be ashamed if you lose in the exam or one time or another. That doesn't mean a bag of windstorm. The thing that you're looking at, and I'm telling you this, not because the teacher told me, Mr. Rowell, he never told me that. I'm telling you that. I know what it is. I went through all the ropes, and you can't tell me a rope. I'm a product of the big, what was it that, what do you call it, back in 1929?
The Depression.
Yeah. It turned out that my dad was a rich person. He owned a piece of land, like 200 acres, some land. He owned 3 houses, 2 rental houses, and then the house that we lived in. Before that Depression was over, we were tossed out on the street. They threw out all the furniture out of the house. They said, you don't have a house to live in. And they owned the house, but he owed money by that time. And he was a rich person. He, corrupt and crooked agents and lawyers got a home. So that's a sign for you guys to watch your step when in life. People are not what they are, what they seem to be. So you will have to watch your step, and nobody will tell you that. You have to find out for yourself. And I'm not kidding you. I went through the mill and I know what I'm talking about. Because of that depression, I wound up on a street. So what? I'll tell you what, and this is God's honest truth. Shoes. I wore 1-inch holes in the bottom of the shoes. When I walked during the rain, the water was going inside. Why? I didn't have the money, or my parents didn't have the money to buy new shoes. So what? I lived out in the sticks, and I hiked into a dump that was in the city area, and I looked around what I could find to fit that. So I found a piece of linoleum, and I cut it out to fit the inside of the shoe, and I put it in there. That's what I used. It lasted me for a year and a half. So you can see, you had to, and I was at that time 14 years old, and I had to run for myself. I was 14 years old. I got on the freight trains, and I rode the freight trains all over the country. You talk about discrimination, about colored people, whatever. Sure. I didn't know what it was. I jumped into one of the boxcars, and here's a black man. He's sitting in the corner. He says to me, "Sir," he says, "you're welcome to be in this car." He was from Alabama, and he was afraid of me. I was 14 years old, and he was 21 years old. Talk about discrimination? Sure. 14-year-old kid. I asked this fellow, I says, "Do you feel like you're eating?" He said, "Oh, I haven't eaten for 2 days." I said, "Well, how much money do you have?" He said, "Oh, I got 17 cents. I said, "Well, I got $16 and something pennies I had." I said, "Let's get off and we'll go down and get something to eat." So we went to a place, and to this day, God's my witness what I'm telling you. The restaurant was one of these restaurants that was made from a railroad car, you know. You've probably seen them. It was one of those. There were two of them. And it was in 2 states. One was Conneaut, Ohio, and then the other one was Erie. And that was at that time, this was when I was 14 years old. I'm a young man right now. I'm 95 years old tomorrow. So that'll give you an idea of the travels that I made. We went in this restaurant, and we're sitting, people were coming and going. A couple of Spanish people come in, they wouldn't serve them. They wouldn't serve me because I was with a black man. So I asked him, I says, "Would you mind serving us?" He says to me, "We don't serve no black niggers, and we don't serve no white people." I said, "I'm part Indian now." He says, "Don't tell me that baloney." And we walked out. We went to the next restaurant, same damn thing happened. And that was in Erie, Pennsylvania. And so I told this fellow, I says, "Look," I says, "let's not eat in a restaurant." I says, "Let's go into town, and I'll go into the store." And I said, "You stay outside, I'll go in the store, I'll get bologna or whatever we had at that time, I don't remember, and made sandwiches with bread." We went back to the boxcar and we ate our meal. That's what happened. That's what discrimination was. And I was 14 years old, and I didn't know what it was at that time. But I was intimidated, and I couldn't help myself because I was just a kid. And that's part of the depression. I rode on freights all over the country, on top of the boxcars, inside the reefers, and they had detectives. They used to run on the top of the boxcar, and they used to beat any of the passengers that were riding free. So few of those detectives that they had there found themselves dead because they pushed them off the train when it was going. But there were a lot of I remember one incident that happened in the Midwest. They took and they locked up a bunch of the people. There were a couple of women on there too, bumming around, and the rest of them, I think there was 7 or 8. No, there were 7 or 8 got on, and there was another 7 with 15. What happened was, the reefer, they had 2 ends. And in those days, they had ice. They wasn't refrigerated. They had ice. There was the refrigeration. The air was coming in through a vent on a roof. And that roof had a door on each end. The door swung up and down this way on a ratchet, meaning a rod that had teeth in it, where you can space that to different angles to get the ventilation air going through. Well, you'd go in there and open that, pull that ratchet off, and drop the door and go in there, and that's where the ice was. Well, the ice was gone, and you could go in there and you could sleep because it would stay fairly warm. Well, what happened was these people, 15 people that got in there, they got into the each end of the car, and those suckers, those detectives, they locked the doors, and that car run on different freight trains all over the country, and I think they were in the Midwest where they finally stopped and they put it on a siding. They found that car 6 months afterward with all of them dead inside. That's what they would do to you. And
K.C., can you tell them how you got into the Navy and how you ended up at Pearl Harbor?
Pardon me?
How did you get into the Navy?
How did I get in the Navy?
And how
sure.
you ended up at Pearl Harbor and what happened there for you?
Very well. During the Depression, the jobs were very scarce. You couldn't buy a job. And at that time, I was still 14 years old. I got to where my folks lived, and they were broke. And they wanted to feed me. I said, no, I said, I'll eat. I said, I got some money, I'll feed. I lied. I didn't have no money. Turn around, and I says, by God, I got C.C. camp. You probably never heard of it. C.C. camps were Civilian Conservation Corps. It was President Roosevelt's project to put 18-year-olds and up, all men, into these camps. You did all kinds of work. The trails, tons of work. Trails, timber, fires. I was on two forest fires while I was in, and I says, boy, that's what I'll do. I'll join up. So I went up there, and recruiter, he says, you want to join the CCs? I says, yeah, how old do you have to be? 18. I said, I'm almost 18. How close are you? I said, I'll be next month, I'll be 18. Oh, you're eligible. They signed me out. So I went to Camp Dix, which was that time Camp Dix, now it's Fort Dix. Turns out that they put me in that place and that camp. And pretty darn soon, there was a sergeant there. I could talk his language. He was more of his own language than the American language. So I talked to him and I said, where's that cadre going? The cadre was a group of people that they had signed out for going to a certain area of the country. He shipped them all over the country. And in this case, they were shipping most of them along the eastern seaboard and New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, and through there, and down to the Mason-Dixon line, what we call the Mason-Dixon line. And you don't even hear of that now. It's the division between the Civil War time, that they had between north and south. Anyway, when I finally got out of that camp, I talked to this individual and I says, well, where's this group going? He says, oh, he said, they're going west. How far west? Way west. I don't know. He said, hell, he says, you want to go there? I said, yeah. I said, further west, the better. And he thought I was kidding. I said, no. He said, well, bring your gear and come on over. He said, the cadre train's leaving in the morning, 8 o'clock. I said, I'll be there. So we're going out, and I'm going on a thing, walking back and forth, and inside the train, when the darn thing gonna stop? It just kept right on going. And I thought I got myself into some kind of a jam. And pretty soon I got near the Rocky Mountains, Utah, or not Arizona, but Wyoming, all those different. I went to there were different areas. I went to a camp in Wyoming. It was a nice camp. They were modern. They had everything. Only thing was they forgot our camp because we had no power. We had mobile power, owning generators. We had 3 of them. 2 of them would run the units, and one was a spare in case the other one died. And it was at night that would happen. They run them only at night. And guess what? We were close to town. It was 96 miles to Green River, Wyoming. And we never saw any liberties once in the blue moon. Myself, I saw liberty. How? I wound up with appendix out in the middle of nowhere. They took me, before I got into any distance, I had just a general appendicitis. Well, we got, in those days, they had all dirt roads. The only roads that they had that were of any significance were roads that went east and west, or a few of them going north and south. This one going north and south, there was one of the roads that we were, it was all dirt. Almost 100 miles of that road was dirt. They come on this washboard, and that darn ruptured the appendix that I had. So they speeded up. I got in the hospital. I had to go through Green River, Wyoming, and go another 25 miles to another town, which was another 25 miles away from there where the hospital was. That's how far. It was the only hospital in the southwest Wyoming. Well, when I got to the hospital, I didn't know what was going on. I was already under the weather. And I stayed in the hospital 2 weeks. In those days, they put you in there and, they put the screen over your face and pour the juices, all the morphine or whatever. And I stayed there 2 weeks. I came back to the camp. First thing I had over there was I had a fight with a guy because he wanted to use the Ranger's pickup, whom he let me use it. All of the camps, by the way, were run this way. You got integrated, you got militarized. In the morning and at night, you were under the Army. There were 3 officers, a captain and 2 lieutenants. They would take over when the crews would come in from the job sites. And you went right through the same system as before, except that is before the early part of the day, except you were then under the Army, and that was in the evening. Myself, I started out when I was 7 years old, and this was during the Depression times. or just before. I drove a car on the farm. I learned the easy way. Well, when I got on a CC camp, they said, I got on the road with a road gang. They're chopping and building roadways up in the mountains. Wind up of the whole setup was, this foreman come up to me, he says, "Don't work so hard." And I thought he was kidding. Don't work so hard, I never heard the word. You know, normally they'd kill you because they wanted to get every bit of work they didn't pay you nothing. And so here I am in a bind. I said, what does this guy want from me? He's always coming up, don't work so hard. Go and get yourself a drink of water. We had what they called lister bags. They were hanging up in the trees in the shade. They bring in the water from the springs by the truck and have it there. You go up there and get yourself a drink. He said, go and get a drink. I said, I don't feel like a drink. He says, you're like a camel. I said, well, I don't want to get a drink. So he says, I'm going to tell you what. He says, you're not coming on a screw tomorrow. He says, you see so-and-so, and it was in the main camp, for me to see this individual. And he was another foreman, a ranger, Forest Service ranger. These were the people who run the camp during the daytime. So I went down, I saw him. He says, you want to drive do you know how to drive a truck? I says, I don't know, I drive a pickup. He says, it's not a truck. Well, he says, why don't we take a ride? He took me up in the mountains. I never drove in the mountains. Going up there, all up, double shifting and all that business. He says, you see me in the morning, I got a truck for you. So I drove a truck. Then I drove a bulldozer. I was operating a bulldozer, pushing the roads. Did all that. Driving 20-ton semi-trailers. Here I was a 14-year-old kid. And that camp, as I said, was almost 100. It was 96 or 95 miles away from Green River. And when I got back from the hospital, half of the camp was gone, or a third of the camp, then a half. They went over the hill. We had all of the members that we had. I was one of the strangers because I was from a different state and different area. And these birds were all from Hell's Kitchen. I don't know if you ever heard of Hell's Kitchen in New York City. All those different bum towns or sub-towns that were in New York City. These guys came in to that camp. Every one of them, except 3 that I knew, they became my friends. And of course, one of the other ones became my friends. They were all either out of training schools or out of jail. The judge told them, you either go to CC camp, we're going to arrange it, or else you're going to jail or this your reform school. And I myself was the only one in there that wasn't, so I became the leader. And I had 36 members in the camp there in one barracks, 36 in each one. We had 4 barracks. There were 260 members in the camp. We had 15 trucks. I wound up to be the truck master and the mechanic for the camp, believe it or not, because I did a little bit of mechanics, and I never expected that, but that's the job that they gave me eventually. Well, all along, I'm going along, and here comes this another opportunity. The leader of that camp, who was a forest ranger, he come up to me, he says, you're going in a garage tomorrow. I says, I don't want to go in the garage tomorrow. I said, I'll be driving my truck. No, you're not. He says, you're going to take care of it. I said, I don't want to take care of the truck. He says, oh, yes, you will. He says, you'll get a leadership, you'll get $45 a month, because a regular CC boy got the big sum of money of $30 a month, and he had to send $5 home to his folks. Well, I was getting 45. I was a leader, and I was sending $15 to my family. Well, lo and behold, here they got a brand new machine. I remember we had a bulldozer. We went in and we were doing this channel in a stream. We hit quicksand in there. Just disappeared in the quicksand. So we had to take it all apart, piece by piece, and the last thing we pulled out were the tracks. We pulled it out with a swamper cat. Swamper is a cat without any blade on it. And this one had a blade. He was trying to cut a new channel, and the darn things hit a quicksand in there, and it just disappeared. So, you know, it was depression, and they got to take the thing apart and put it back together again. And that's what happened there. But this was some of the work that I did. Fires, yeah, I was on fires. I was a truck master, which was the job that they put me in a garage. I was in charge of 15 trucks, 4 these bulldozers, 1 auto patrol, which was an automatic grader type of machine that I had to take care of that also. We also dipped logs in creosote. I don't know if you ever heard of creosote. Creosote was a preservative on the old electric poles. They don't do that. They found out that's a cancer causer. So the wind up there was, I finally said, I want to see the country a little bit. So I drove to Fort Douglas, Utah, which was the 9th area headquarters. The Forest Service was there, and the Army and everybody else. Went up there and I says, you need any truck tires? Oh yeah, we need them all the time. So I says, what do you got? He says, GI truck. I said, okay. He says, you want to drive? I said, yeah. Well, come on. He says, we'll see how you drive. They took me up in the mountains in the worst darn place, muddy holes. So he says, oh, you'll do. Put me in a GI truck. I went all over in the 9th Court area. I was caught in blizzards and everything. And that's why I say I've been through the mill once over and twice. And as a kid, by that time I was 17. Yeah, I was 17 years old. I got out of CC camp because my brother, who was 2.5 years older than I was, he kept writing me and saying, jobs are open up, come on, you can get a job. For 2 months he's writing me, telling me this baloney, and I didn't believe him. And he said, oh no, he says, believe me, he says, the jobs are here. So what I do, like a jerk, I pulled in with the truck, and they told me they got a letter and they want me to go back and go to my folks' home. There's a job waiting for me. I got there, there was no damn job. So I told him, I said, what, you give me the baloney about no job, and there's jobs, plenty of them. He says, no, but he says, you can join the Navy. I says, I don't want to join the Navy, I want to join the Marines. No, you don't want to join the Marines. He says, a lot of the sailors there, they know you, blah, 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 and all that. So, okay, it took him 2.5, 3 months. He worked on me. I joined the Navy. I made 2 cruises while I was in the reserve. All of a sudden, and I was in the ready reserve, the one that they pick up a phone, you know, and say, come here, sailor. They're not the ones that give you 6 months to report or 3 months to report. This one here, you go right after they call you and the time that they tell you. It's either just a few days. And so I went. I went in there, and first thing you know, I was on a destroyer. Next thing you know, I was on another ship, and another ship, and another ship. The war started, and I was at Pearl Harbor. I went from Pearl Harbor to Guadalcanal and over the South Pacific, all the places that you can think of. I was amongst the native people, the Polynesians, the Melanesians, everything under the sun, because that's what these islands are composed. There's no white people, so-called white people, that ever been in a lot of those places, and we were getting in there. In fact, in Guadalcanal, that island was headhunters before we went in there. And suddenly we taught them how to behave, and we killed a bunch of them. And then they saw the light, and then they were our friends, and they were against the Japs. That's the way it turned out. But I was all through there, all the different places, New Guinea, all the eastern areas, the northern. I didn't go farther north except later on. But all that time that I was there, I became a chief machinist on one of the ships. I was on a destroyer, I was on a heavy cruiser. It's still out there, by the way. 250 or 260 feet of water. Battle of Savo Island. Incidentally, you can read about it. All this that I'm telling you is not stories that I'm making. We made the history. The book that you can read, pick it up. The name of the ship was Quincy, USS Quincy, CA-39. Read that book. It'll show you and tell you what the battle was all about. That ship and 6 others were sunk in the very beginning of the war, when nobody knew what was going on. We're gonna wipe out the Japs, wipe them out. And, stupid people. And I said, yeah, we'll wipe them out. Oh, they all wear glasses, they can't see at night. Some of the best fighters I've seen were the Japs. They get up there and they beat the hell out of our ships. That same thing happened this was at 2 p.m. in the morning of the 2nd of January. We come out of Guadalcanal and got into the Bay Area, and first thing you know, all hell broke loose. They open up on us. That goddamn, the jerks, these officers knew nothing about fighting. They were fighting a war like, you've seen in pictures, movies, and in books. All the ships are in line over here, and its enemy is over here in a line, and they're exchanging shots. That was the Spanish-American War, not the Spanish-American War, but the war in Spain. The way the thing winds up, there are 7 ships, every one of them got sunk that night. We lost, on the ship that I was on, right now there's buried exactly 689 sailors that went down with that ship. And the same thing happened on the other one. We lost several thousand men just out of the 7 ships. And the Japs were all over the place, and we could have knocked them off, and it was in the early morning, we got totally wiped out. Any questions, by the way? Anybody got any questions?
It's me again.
Pardon?
Okay. On December 7th, at 7:45 in the morning, what were you doing? What were your duties that day?
And what?
On December 7th, 7:45 in the morning.
7:45, you mean now, or?
Back December 7th, 1941.
In 1941?
What was your duties? What were you doing?
Well, here's what happened. I had a shipmate, a good friend of mine. He was from Montana. He and I became very good friends. We used to make liberties all together, meaning we'd go ashore and have fun, doing all kinds of things. We never drank. It was unusual for sailors because we had most of the sailors, they were just common drunks. I might say that, and it's the God's honest truth. And that's why I didn't get along with a lot of them. And neither it was worse as far as officers. So when whoever's in here thinking about the Navy, if you choose the Navy, make sure you're with the crew, not with the damn officers, because you'll regret it before you get out. Those officers, a lot of them, they got lost in the storm. You know, every time it got storm, they got rid of the bad officers. And they got lost in the storm. That's what the official reading was. And that really happened.
So on that day, what were you doing that day? You said you and your best friend?
About what?
Your best friend and you were in the ship? You and your best friend were on ship?
You know, I'm almost deaf.
Oh, that's two of us, okay.
That's from the
But
guns.
you said you and your best friend were on board ship.
What I was doing?
What were you doing?
Well, on that, my job when I went in from the reserve, because when I was with the fleet in the reserve, I always got to help with the after steering room, meaning we steered the ship from the rear if it got damaged or something went wrong. And those old ships had cables coming from the bridge down to the lower part of the rear of the steering room. They had two steering engines that went back and forth. One went one way and the other one went the other direction. The directions were controlled by the cables coming from the bridge. When they moved one way, they steered the ship, and it was coupled by a gear down to the rudder, and that's the way that it was operating. And I was in charge of that. But they were short on that ship of gunners. So he come up to me and said, "You know something about guns?" I said, "Yeah." I says, "I studied them." I said, "But I haven't fired them." He says, "Well, we need gunners. We're short gunners." He says, "Would you take on a gun?" I said, "Sure." So I took on a gun. Guess what? That was a big mistake that I made, because after that, you got a question?
Yeah, were you injured?
Pardon?
Were you injured in Pearl Harbor?
Were you wounded?
Twice only. Once in the back and this whole side. See, I can't lift my arm. This one I could, but this one I can't. I got a couple holes. I got little bits of shrapnel in my chest over here. When I take my medications, pills, you know, or I eat, food gets stuck in my throat because my whole rib cage is moved over and twisted, so my esophagus is flattened out on one side. So I have a problem there. I've had it ever since. But yeah, I got my share of that. Any other questions? Go ahead, speak loudly, please, because I don't have my hearing aids because they're broken and they're in the hospital. Good place to get them fixed.
What was going through your mind when you saw those Japanese planes?
Pardon?
So what was going through your mind when you saw the Japanese fighters?
I still can't.
What was going through your mind? What were you thinking when you saw the Japanese planes?
Well, in the beginning, at Pearl Harbor, to be honest with you, I got scared. I said, what the hell I didn't do anything to the Japs, and they're here, they're bombing me, and they're all over the place like flies. But then I got mad. When I got mad, all hell broke loose. I ran down with my buddy, by John Boozema, normally during the, before the war, that is. And we two were the first ones out of the whole crew members on a ship that were up. By 6 o'clock in the morning, we were on a deck, on top side. Well, what happened was, this particular morning, I was supposed to go to church on the USS California. It got sunk on me. And I didn't go to church, of course. But what happened was, the rest of the day, of course, we were fighting it for our lives. We were trying to save our own necks and our own crews. And these suckers were coming in like flies all over the place. There were, all the battleships were sunk, every one of them. By what? Midget torpedoes, midget subs. And I was the guy that spotted them. And his jerk that was there on a fire control, he says, I don't want to hear anything about subs. There are no subs. I checked up, blah, blah, blah. And I said, go to hell. Everybody said, did you tell him that? I said, didn't you hear over the loudspeaker? I said, yeah, I told him to go to hell. He didn't say anything. But then he says to me when I made the second or third report that I saw another sub. So you'd see the periscopes. And I seen one go on the north end of the bay. The bay was round. It had a island in the middle, which was a naval air station at that time. It's decommissioned now. They don't have it there. You could see from one side to the other. When the Arizona got hit, I saw that gun turret with the two barrels go straight up and someplace in the water, because at that time I had to turn to look. My attention went for planes that were coming in, so I don't know what happened to it. But the whole ship blew up, the whole front end of the ship blew up, and it's still out there. The ship, there's all the ships around our ship, there were 12 of them, every one of them are sunk. The other ship that was close by to us, the Arizona was on the other side of the island. They got sunk. The turret blew up, and of course the thing went up in smoke. Next to us was the USS Utah, which is not, it's got a battleship's name, but it's not a battleship because they took off all the guns and they put in 14-inch logs on top of the deck, and they use it for real live bombing. The Navy, that is, used that ship for bombing practices at sea. They came in the night before we did, and they took our slip where we anchored all the time. Morning we pulled in. We were at sea, and we came in at night. And that morning when he came in, this ship radioed us to the captain, and he says, sir, he says, I know this is your slip, but he says, we're pulling out in the morning. Is it all right if we stay the night? The captain says, sure, we'll take the flying moor out in the stream. And we were right offshore with two cables tied to a buoy in the middle. Next to us was the USS Curtis, a seaplane tunnler. Well, we shot down a plane, and the plane dropped on top of them, set them on fire. It was just a hell of a mess all through. Then these subs that I'm speaking of, they're coming all over the place. One went around, he fired his torpedoes evidently, and I didn't know at the time. They had two torpedoes. If you look at those pictures, there is a picture of one of those. They were not too long. They were two-man ships, and they were diesel. And one was a junior officer, and the other one was a chief petty officer that operated that sub. I didn't know that. I didn't know it was a small sub. All I saw was a periscope. And the first one I saw was just behind us. I said, what the hell is that sub doing there? Is that ours? Because in that area there was our submarine base where our subs were anchored, and they were going by. And I said, well, it must be one of our subs. But I'm watching them. I was a curious person. Anything I saw that was weird, I'd watch. That made a good lookout person. That's the job that I took, because what I started to tell you about my friend, my buddy, he, at that point, told me, he says, you know, the crews left down on the bottom of our bunch, the bunch that I worked with. I had 40 sailors that worked for me on that ship. I was in charge of a machine shop. It was 300 feet long, and the width of the ship, I don't know what's, I don't know, 70, 80, 100 feet, something like that. And full equipment. Well, I went down the bottom, I got these sailors, and I was going to be on the guns on that battle. I got to back up on top side with these sailors, and here's two rookie sailors sitting in the gun seats, and they wouldn't budge. And I didn't have no time to argue, so I took the next job, which was surface and sky lookout. And that's how I come to get involved with the people on the main control. And so I saw one sub that went by us, and no, he came the other way. This one came up the channel. He started going, and all of a sudden he's going in a circle, he's backing up, he's turning around. I said, something wrong with that sub. I said, must be, because he was doing crazy things. And then by the time I got my attention on planes or some other thing, I looked there and it was gone. That was one. Then another one I saw going down the channel. We took one of the side, there were side channels to other anchorages. Then I saw this one going behind us, and he went around the bay and right out to the back end. Guess what? He came from Battleship Row. He'd done his job already. 2 torpedoes. All of a sudden I hear this big blast go off, and part of the bay lifted up like this, big round thing about 20 feet round and about 3 feet high, and they come back down. I said, must be a sub. I reported. That's no sub. That's a torpedo. And he's telling me what I already know. A torpedo is a 30-foot high, leaves a 30-foot spout in the water. This was a round thing, big, about 3-4 foot high. So what happened? They did kamikaze, the crew. See, kamikaze in Japanese means kill yourself. So they blew up the sub. There's a 2-man crew. They pulled the pin, and all those subs had charges on them. When they wanted to, they pulled the pin and blew the ship. They could get under a ship and blow it up. And they did the same thing there. When it was all over with, I acknowledged 7 subs in that harbor. And finally, last year, the government started redoing all the charges that were made during that battle. Our ship shot down 7 planes, and we got one sub. We got a sub. The gunner, the sub was to the stern of the ship, and I could see that sub, and I seen it get jarred when it was a round going off. And this guy, he was a gunner's mate. He was a Polish-American sailor. He was damn good. He was a gunner's mate. He takes the shell out, which was totally illegal, to pull the shell back out of the gun once you had it in there. You had to fire it. He did. He pulled the shell out, threw it over the side. He turned the gun around, and he bore-sighted through the barrel of the muzzle of the gun and fired a round. Guess what? He put a round right through the conning tower of that sub. he splattered the commander all over the inside of the place there, the Jap commander. So anyway, the sub kept on coming, and I see it turn around and go back, and I said, well, Jim, probably something wrong. Maybe he changed his mind, because he was directly behind us going around the other side. He turned around and come back. Where is he going? Between us and two other ships. And here, I said, that guy's crazy. He went and he wasn't crazy, he was smart. He goes in between two American ships. He's shielded by the ships because nobody will fire at them, see? And so, but he had a surprise coming. We had this gunner's mate. He bore-sighted that barrel when he was coming in between us, and he let that, it was a 3-inch gun. That thing went right through the conning tower and he splattered him. Who got the credit? USS Curtis. They never even fired on that gun, but they got the credit. We got credit for 2 airplanes. So, you know, on the ships, if you ever seen them or didn't see them, they had scorecards on the side of the bridge. And it's had so many planes, so many ships, so many bombardments, so on, so on. Whole rack. It was a scorecard. Well, we had 7 ships and 1 sub, and there was something else that we did, I forget it was. Anyway, the Admiral sends a signal, get that painting off. All the ships that had those on there told them to get them off. All we got credit was no sub, and we got 1 plane. I mean, smart people. That's why I say they were the most incompetent people that I've ever seen in my life, of the damn Navy officers. And you guys who are going, if you ever follow through and go in there, don't be one of them. Be a real officer, take command, make your own decisions. Don't listen to any of it, because you'll screw up, and when you screw up, you either get killed or you kill a bunch of your crew. That's what happens. I had a gun crew of I had a 20 millimeters. I had a 3-inch gun. I had a pair of 40 millimeters, which is all the pom-poms. And I had 40 some men in the shop. And it turned out that in that case, if I seen one of my gunners that they were screwing up or playing games or something like that while we were on our guns, they'd be off the next day to get somebody else. I didn't want anybody there that played games or horsed around. That wasn't the place to do it, and not at that time, not when it was action, because you got other people got killed because of the stupidity and the mistakes that you made. So these guys wind up killing other people by their stupidity. So just remember what I'm saying. When you go, if you're going to follow the Navy line, I don't care what it is, whether you're going to be a doctor or gunnery officer, Joe Blow, or whatever your job's going to be a good one. And let the sailors will respect you. They'll see it in you. But if you're going to be a lemon, that's what they're going to see in you. Big darn lemon with a hat on. That's all it'll be. And you'll never be respected by the crew. And the crew is the ones that run the ship. The chiefs are the top runners of completely the whole outfit. The chief machinists or the chief masters that they had on the ship, they were the ones that run the ship. Something went wrong, they didn't go to another officer, they went to that particular individual. So there's another tip you want to remember. He's the guy you want to get real friendly with, and he's the only guy that you can get close to other than the rest of the crew, because you're not supposed to get close to the crew members. But just ignore that. Get on the side someplace where the other officers don't see you and do your thing. I mean, that's what I did. Anyway, go ahead.
What was your rank in the Navy?
Pardon?
What was your rank in, like, your job?
Your rank, what was your rank?
I was a chief machinist on a ship. I had 40 men in the shop and guns.
What, was that an E5, E6?
Pardon?
E5, E6?
No, I had the same people. The way they did was they would take the head of department, which was me. We had, as I said, it was a large shop. We had a 300-foot crane on rails, believe it or not, on either side of the ship that went through there, that we could lift all kinds of heavy equipment,
Okay.
guns, and and also we would also have charge of other divisions on a ship, that they responded to us, to me, on that ship. And so there was a lot of responsibility, I admit, and it worked on you.
Okay. This class is going to have to go here pretty soon, but I want you to tell them that you were a POW.
Oh yeah, they were generous to me. Not like the other ones. The other ones are POWs of the Japs. I was an American POW. Yeah, that stupid U.S. Army, the medical corps couldn't identify me when I was in the Philippine Islands. And I was supposed to go, I went ashore on a ship, then I went ashore to another ship and another ship and a third ship, and then I finally wound up on a LSD. And they put me in the wrong spot. Instead of putting me south, they put me north. And I was on the north coast of the Philippines, north of Lanao, which is in the middle of the islands. There was a big naval base there and a big air base. I had to walk from there south where the hospital was that I was supposed to go to get treatment. And it was like 18 miles, I think, and I walked all the way. At night, I had to walk. Shooting was going on all over the goddamn side of the mountains there, and I couldn't walk up there, so I walked on a road that the Sea Beach just built. I was walking on that road, and at night I couldn't even be on that road, so I went on the shore. Along the shore I walked, and I really got hungry, so I ate. I don't know if any of you heard of what opihi or opai is. They're Polynesian words, by the way. They're these clams that stick to the big boulders along the beach. I used to pick them off and eat them raw because I was pretty hungry, So that was one of the things that I did while I was hiking. And finally, when I got to the hospital, it was what do you call this, tent hospital. It wasn't a regular hospital. What is that?
A MASH?
MASH outfit, yeah. It was a tent hospital. Everything was tents. Wards were tents. Oh, just before I got into that place, I finally got in, and here are two infantry, 7th Division infantry soldiers. Both of them were shot, one over here and one on the other arm over here. And so they come down off the mountain where they were fighting, and they were sitting on a road there. They met me, and they convinced me not to go back on the mountain. I was going to go with the Philippine guerrillas, and they didn't want me to go there. They said, go to the hospital, you're all beat up and all that, blah, blah, blah. I told him, no, I know, and then I said, okay. So he says, the sergeant says to me, well, there's an ambulance coming for us because there are 2 other ambulances picked up casualties and they didn't have enough. It was the same thing. Me, every time I needed an ambulance, I was the last one on, first one on, last one off, no ambulance. Anyway, this is what happened in this case. And that's where I got shot up. I met this major. No, he was he was a higher ranking officer. They turn around and
This is the class that's going back.
that's all right.
I'm their teacher. Thank you. Thank you for
betcha.
letting us sit
I
in.
hope you learned something.
I did. I did. You don't like officers. Thank you for your service to the country.
I just joined that way.
Thank you.
So he was the guy that couldn't identify me. I says, I have my dog tags. I'm a sailor. I belong in the Navy. So blah, blah, blah. And I couldn't convince the jerk. Another one of those stupid officers. So what happened? He puts me in jail because he couldn't identify me. I pulled out my dog tags. I had them. I pulled them out. Said, here's my dog tags. I got my ID in my little pocket here that I had. Pulled that out, showed him. He said, that don't mean a damn thing to me. He said, we pick those up every day on the battlefield. So he says to the nurse, he says, put him in a ward and strip him down. I said, no woman's gonna strip me down. And she said, nurse, I said, I don't give a darn what she is. So they did. They took me and they stripped me down, put 2 jugs. In those days, they didn't have plastic bags. They had jugs. They put me full of needles. They were trying to keep me alive, trying to, make it easier for me. Finally, they came up and they said to me, you're not responding, we got to get rid of you. I said, what are you going to do? He said, you got to go to a regular hospital. I said, you can't go to a MASH outfit. So I said, well, okay. Meantime, I find out I'm a prisoner. They couldn't identify who I was, and they tried to find out, and I told them who I was. They didn't believe me, so I said, go to hell too. Yeah, I spent 18 months of my life because of stupidity of officers. That's why I had it in for them. And so I got on a plane, a C-54 4-inch, and I was the first one on because I was a casualty. We flew from 7 o'clock till 12 o'clock at night from Philippine Islands to New Guinea, right across the area. We got to New Guinea to where we're supposed to land. All the lights are off. We're almost out of fuel going around the island, around. We finally, I heard some real juicy language by the cockpit, by the way, because in those days they never had doors on the cockpit. They just had them off for emergency purposes. So I can hear everything's going on. He's talking to the tower, put them on, put on the lights, do this, do that. Then he says, you SOB, you got 2 minutes to turn on the lights. If not, he says, send out the crash boats because I'm putting it down in the water. They finally, we were just getting by the approach, lights go on. And guess what? Lights went on. This pilot, he was one of the best that I flew with. He banked that plane like this. He was sliding it sideways and came in right over the runway. He cut on over the runway and the first bomb went off, and he's jerking the plane, trying to avoid the bombs as he's going down. The plane was going dancing up and down, twisted sideways, and 4-engine airplanes, not small. But he was doing those tricks and still making that runway. And I look, and there's this big building. And they told me, well, that building was the part that you came in on is the Southwest major assembly for the Southwest Transport Command. And the other side was a huge garage that they fixed planes. And I look and I says, we're going right into that place. It looked like we're going right straight forward. And he's bouncing around every time a bomb came close to the plane, he moved the plane over or he jumped or he did some crazy thing, but it actually saved us. Come towards the side of the building, I says, it's a hell of an oath. I'm saying this to myself, and I'm saying a Holy Mary, because I know I'm going to get killed. And he says, we got a problem. I don't know if I can stop it. And he gets right up to the building and he makes a loop this way and the thing tips over sideways and he sticks on the brakes and he stops. So it saved a whole bunch of people. There was 27 passengers on and casualties. And I was the first one on, last one off. And the driver of the ambulance says, like some of the other instances, he says to me, listen, guy, he says, stay right here. He says, we're going to be back. We'll pick you up. I mean, stay right here. This was on a tarmac. And the tarmac was all dirt, you know. They're all dirt tarmacs. They weren't, you know, finished highways. I'm sitting there, the bombing got worse and worse and worse. Pretty soon my lights went out. I don't know what the hell happened, but when these guys found me, the ambulance finally got there, they were looking, he says, what the hell are you doing over here? I said, I don't know, my lights went out, and here I am. I was on the other side of the tarmac, and I was in the weeds. And so they picked me up and took me to the hospital. End of story for that. But that's where I stopped. The war was nearly over at that point, because they had 2 weeks later I was taken to the States, to San Francisco. I went to the receiving hospital on Moscow Street. I never forgot that. And the nurses there fixed up a big sign like this that said POW, and they said, that's your bunk. I said, that's not my bunk, that's POW. He said, that's what you are. I says, no, I'm not no more. The war was over for me. They put me on a hospital evacuation ship when I got to the States. Became a drunk for 3 years because there was no medication for me when I got back to the States, and all that. I won't even get into that. And then I finally, that's how I met my wife, by the way. I was a drunken bum. I was drunk every day of the week. I never went to church, nothing. When the workers went out from their jobs, I went in a bar. When the workers come back in the morning, I went in a bar. I had two buddies, they called us the Three Musketeers. We were all drunk all the time. The one was a pharmacist mate in the Navy. The other one was a Marine, but he was never overseas. He never saw action, nothing. But the pharmacist did. He had access to all kinds of drugs. I didn't know it at that time, and he became a druggist. Drugs. Well, first thing you know, booze and drugs didn't mix. He died. Then the other one died, and I was alone. I was still drinking. Finally, I got away from that place. I thought it was best for me. And that's when I came to New Mexico. And in fact, I was supposed to come to New Mexico 2 years before. They offered me a job at the lab, and I refused it because I was such a rotten mess. I was shaky and everything. I couldn't handle a job, and I knew it. So 2 years later, they offered me a job again. That time I took it. So I moved my family, and I was married. And my wife, the woman that I met me as a drunk, I stopped drinking because of her. And believe it or not, this is a God's honest truth, I never drink since that time. I don't drink. I don't smoke. I don't do nothing. I just play with women.
Guys, any other questions?
Any questions?
I have a couple. Where were you from originally?
Pardon me?
Where are you from originally? Like before all this stuff, where were
I
you
come
born?
from originally, well, I was raised near a Indian reservation in upstate, northwest upstate New York.
Okay.
And from there, I went to Utah as a kid. I stayed there for a number of years, and then I was in CC camps and so on, and then I finally wound up in a war. And here I am today. I worked at the laboratory. I did take the job at the Los Alamos Scientific Laboratory. I was there for 47 years, and guess what? I had all those good jobs where people got killed.
What town were you from in New York?
Pardon?
What town in New York?
What town in New York?
What, I forget, it was an Indian town. I know the name, but I don't remember it now.
I have another one.
got-
Anything else?
Yeah, I have another one.
Oh,
real quick.
I'll go ahead. Sorry.
Like you've had a lot of really good luck over the years, and what do you like attribute that to?
And I'm my
You
wife.
have to get closer. Here.
For your luck, like you've had really good luck, and I was wondering like what do you think that has to do with?
I don't know if it was good luck or just stupidity on my part getting in the. Oh, I'll take that job. Yeah, take the job, and then we lose the plane. But I'll take the job. We lost 2 airplanes. One was shot down, believe it or not, by rockets near Kwajalein Islands by our own people. One of them. And then we lost 27 crew members on that one. Then another one climbed down the side of a mountain. He didn't know about, it was a loadmaster. He didn't know about if you go higher up, you put in less gas. Filled it up full, the plane took off. He went up the side of the mountain, couldn't lift off, and he just rubbed himself to nothing before he got to the top. So there was 2 of them. We lost actually 4 planes all told. Any other questions? Anybody? Don't have to be squeamish.
I'm gonna let them get up and walk around. Look at the
Right,
pictures.
Yeah.
Look at the pictures up here, guys. They're graphic. They're real. They've been sitting too long. Are you okay?
Yeah, I'm okay.
You got your
Sure.
coffee right here?
Pardon?
Your coffee's right there.
I know it. I can't drink and talk. Thanks. Mm. Yeah, I had to talk fast and jump around. He couldn't. I had, all this was so fast, so I didn't have no plan. or nothing.
Oh, well, you did fine. Thank you.
Yeah. Glad that you made use of it.
Oh, yes, sir.
There's some gory pictures, but don't let that turn you down. I have some at home that are worse than those.
I'm gonna go check downstairs and see if Edmund's.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't have, my ears are bad from all that noise and whistling and I can't hear 20 feet. Can't help it. I did my little bit for my country, but they didn't do their little bit for me. They put me in jail. Yeah, they owe me money for all that stay, and they owe me money for being in the jail and the prison, and then they owe me money because I had PTSD, I had operational fatigue, I had the combat fatigue, I had everything else.
Where were you at when you were in jail?
Pardon?
Where were you? Where did they put you in jail? Where were you?
Well, I was all over the Pacific. South Pacific, up in the Philippines, up in the southeast, southwest, Guadalcanal, Tulagi, Dubadura, Buna. I was in a place there where the Japs were occupying. We kicked them out. They took and they raped the women. They got pregnant. They took and shaved the woman's hair. When the baby was born, they killed the baby because he was a half-breed. See, the natives did that. Yeah.
When did they realize you were in the Navy?
I can tell you a lot of weird stories that shake your head, but I won't.
When did they finally realize you were in the Navy?
Pardon?
When did they finally realize you were in the Navy? When did they realize you were you were part of the Navy?
When I was what?
When you were in the Navy, how did they find out?
I still didn't
Say
do
louder.
something.
How did they finally find out that you were in the Navy?
How did I find out?
Yeah, how did they know?
The day that they mobilized, see, that suddenly Hitler was going crazy. And guess what? My mother found out my brother was already in. See? My mother found out that I was going in. She blew a fuse. Man, she was really raving. Hitler's going crazy all over Europe, blah, blah, this and that. You're going to go out there first and you're going to get yourself killed. You're going to this and that. I said, Mom, I want to be on the ground floor. But that's what happened. So here I am. A lousy sailor, it's all bent out of shape, got broken bones. Oh, by the way, I fell 2 years ago on top of that, up in the mountains where I used to live. See, I live now here in La Mesilla. I have a home there. And up there I lived in the mountains. I was at, it was about 6,000 feet. And it's always cold. Turned out that, I use that term, turned out, because it turned from one point to another. That night, I came home from the hospital, VA hospital in Albuquerque. They wouldn't give me, I needed surgical socks to keep my feet together. They had a stupid woman over there that just took charge. She says, if you want your socks, you be here 9 o'clock, that door will open for you. I said, you know what? Go to hell. That's the term I always use. I told her, go to hell. I says, you put the socks on for me. When I got home, that's what happened to me. I took a spill. So I had 22 steps to get to the house up on the side of the mountain. And somehow I just caved in, and that's why I got a problem now. And the husband, he has to take care of me and make sure that a lot of times he's grabbed me already from taking a bad spill. But that's what happened to me. I knocked out, I loosened up, I think 3 or 4 teeth. I broke my hip. I broke another bone, and I had already a brace from another accident. So they had to patch me up all over again and put me in the hospital for 2 years. Yeah.
Did you guys see
And
the
then
pictures?
They were talking about. They were talking about the nurses and that. I says, well, doesn't your wife ever come and see? My wife never visited me except one time. I said, no. I said, she's a loser. Once you get rid of it, we'll marry you. I said, I can't do that. I said, I'm all broken up. I said, I'm going to be broken up. Yeah. They treated me real fine in the hospital, though. And especially now in the VA hospitals. I go to 3 of them. Yeah, I was trying to speak fast because he told me he hasn't got much time, so that's why I was jumping from one subject to another. I'd back up a lot of times. I normally don't do that, and I got plenty of times. I got about an hour and a half. I've done this before a few times, and see, I'm going to pay for it tonight. PTSD will come up. Not good. But the hospital told me that's good for you. You want to do that. I said, yeah. I said, I'll be sick tonight. But I hope all of you learn something to learn what war is, learn how people react and all that. And especially the guys that were in ROTC, they were just in the low grade reserve, you know. Next is the regular reserve. And from there they go into the regular Navy. But they gotta know what they're doing. And I hate to see our guys from this state. I'm a state's rights, by the way. I have no use for the federal government. That's a pigsty there with all the pigs in there. You know, when some of you that were on a farm or ranch, you see, you throw the slop in a sty and all the pigs rush in there, each one pushing the other one up. That's the same thing with the so-called senators, or people that we vote in. They're the ones that are going to do the world for us. They get in there, and what are they? They're nothing but a bunch of crooks waiting to get at the money. All of them. They're no different. And the ones that are honest, well, it takes 1 or 2 terms. They get in that smoke screen. They're in the rest of them. No changes. My recommendation is fire everybody. And even if you get worse ones in there, the worst ones will be better than the bad ones that you had before.
John Kennedy.
He was the only one and they killed him. And who killed him? The guys in Congress. And,
As a Navy officer,
huh?
did you ever meet him?
No, but I seen him a couple of times.
Okay.
But he was a lousy sailor. Yeah, he had that PT boat, and what does he do? He's going in the night, and he doesn't even know where he's at, and he's in the Japanese waters, and a Japanese sub comes around and cuts the PT boat in half. Killed. I think he got two sailors got killed in that.
Did you serve on a PT boat?
You know, I almost did because I rode in those things. I rode in them. I know what they are.
Fun ride, up and down.
Oh yeah, but no, they don't go so much like the ships. The ones that go up and down are the destroyers, and the destroyer sailors always, you'll hear them say, "Man, this thing is getting choppy. They ought to start paying us submarine pay because we're mostly underwater and above." And that's true because every time a big wave come along, instead of going over, the ship would go right into the wave. And the whole front end of the ship, guns and all, and the bridge be in the water, underwater.
Okay. Well, the bell's about ready to ring.
Yeah, and I incidentally will recommend get books and read about what I said. You'll remember the names of the places or the ships, like the Quincy, the one that I was on. Get a book, and they'll tell you about the Quincy, what that went through. The Guerrero, it's still down there. It's the only ship that still is around, but it's 250 or 260 feet deep, with 689 sailors on it. Right, a lot of them that I sailed with.
Okay, any other questions, guys?
Huh?
When's the last
Yeah,
time you?
question?
Yeah. When's the last time you visited Pearl Harbor?
Visited who?
Pearl Harbor.
Pearl Harbor. I was there 2 years ago. That wasn't the first time. I was there 2 years ago on a VIP trip, and they gave me the really VIP treatment. That's when they got the new tourist boats, the 60 passenger boats. They gave me one of those boats to sail all over the bay. That was the last time I was there, but see, when I worked for the lab and I flew those planes, we used to go all over the world. So coming in from the Pacific, we'd come in at Hickam Air Base, and Hickam Air Base is part of that area. It's right across the bay from Pearl Harbor. And so I'd always go down and pay my respects to the sailors on the Arizona and on the Utah. If you go out there, be sure you see both ships. The Arizona is in better shape because it's a memorial. That's what they try, as I said before, what they try to do is make a memorial out of the USS Utah. And the banks there are so greasy and a lot of clay. The ship kept sliding on it back into the water. So the salvagers that were working for the government, they finally gave it up. And it's laying there on the side. And they have a ramp. You can walk right up to it.
Okay, guys, we'll finish up on Wednesday. You guys, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hope you enjoyed it. Like I say, get the books.
Okay, let me,
Are you gonna be here tomorrow? No. I won't be here Wednesday.
oh, okay. Good.
What's your full name so I can write it down? Your full name? Oh, like
My full name
Yeah.
is Casimir,
How do you spell it?
C-A-S-I-S-I-M-I-R.
You're lucky to see me soon.
C-A-S.
I-M-I-R. Or Casimiro, C-A-S-I-M-O-R. Or they call me different complications. Three of them. I have to look it up.
And then what's your last name?
Stevens, S-T-E-V-E-N. And it's not an Anglo name.
Yeah, what's your background? You said you're like half Indian? Or
Yeah,
half
I'm not
Native?
half, I got some blood in me.
Some?
Yeah, but I speak 3-4 different languages.
Oh, wow, that's great.
I used to speak a lot of Polynesian, but
Oh, yeah.
because I was out there, Melanesian.
Right.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Well, let me take your cup.
Yeah, I'll take another slug.
Okay. Okay, sir.
Thanks, Will.
Thank you very much, sir. Edmund is right there. Let's
Yes,
let's
he's my guard.
let's get you up a little bit. Get those leg muscles moving.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, I'm loose. I got it. Put it in second gear. I don't know when to speed, slow and slow.
My brother's class, doing crime scene thing. I think it's coming. Is that